This is going to be a very quick, very unprofessional comparison between the Harbor Freight Chicago Electric 90 amp flux core welder and the Eastwood MIG 135 gas and flux core welder. I'm going to be using flux core wire with it as well. I'm just going to be testing it out on this piece of what I think is about 16 gauge sheet metal. I'm going to lay down a couple beads. I might do a few little tests first just to set it up, and then I'll show you how they both run and tell you what I think. Again, this is just a quick initial impression, not a full review, not a full comparison, and both of them running flux core when this one's capable of gas, but the Harbor Freight is not. Now, the biggest difference between these two welders, other than the ability to use gas, is the adjustability. As you can see, the Harbor Freight only has one knob for wire feed speed, and it has a min-max for the power, whereas the MIG 135 has a wire feed speed and an arc voltage control, and it just has a lot more adjustability. I just barely tried it on some small metal, and I already like it more just because I can turn it down so low and not burn through. But I'm just going to see how the beads look on this with both of them using flux core wire. So I'm going to get to testing. Alright, I've done my couple test beads just to be happy with where these settings are at for my initial compressions. I'm going to start with the Harbor Freight welder. Yes, I'm getting everything wet and dirty. It's okay. So there's the penetration on the back side. That one right there. And you can see that looks like it's probably going to stick to that metal. I mean, again, I'm not a professional welder, but that's going to stay where it is. And as far as the bead goes, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell. There's a lot of splatter, but that could be down to the wire I'm using. I think I'm using the I&E tub in the Miller, and in this one I'm not 100% sure. I think it might be Hobart from Tractor Supply Co. But at the start it beaded up a little bit, and then as it went on the penetration got better. And down here, this is actually a pretty nice bead. So I'm fairly happy with that. I might go a little more, do another test of that one just to show you. And you know, it seems like I'm building up a little bit, so I might turn it up just a little, I think. It should turn up the power as well. And you can see, I mean, that's definitely penetrating. Again, a little bit of buildup. Nothing crazy. I can go a little faster. This is pretty thin metal, so I might be too high of a setting. But, you know, it penetrates. I'll turn it down a little bit, go down lower, just to show you guys. Yeah, and so that's just definitely too low. I'm not getting enough power or enough wire. So I'll move on to the Eastwood, which does have a much nicer grounding clamp, which never hurts. But my initial impressions are that this thing just runs a lot smoother, so I'll show you what I mean. I will note this wire is a little less flexible because it's set up for gas, but that's why it's good to have a nice welding setup. I'm going to try it anyway. And I mean, that just looks a lot nicer to me. There's less splatter, which again could be down to the wire. Granted, I have it on what must be a higher setting, but I'll show you a couple other settings too. And as for penetration, I mean, that penetration, it looks almost identical, but this looks just a little bit nicer and smoother. Obviously there in the middle I was a little too quick with it, but yeah, it's just nice. You know, it seems like the heat gets more where it needs to go. And again, this is just an initial impression. Maybe it's placebo effect, but I mean, you could hear it was less spattery, it was more consistent. It laid down a very similar bead in less time with the same penetration. So I'm going to turn it up a little bit first, turn up the power, but not the wire speed, just to show you what that looks like. And also, yes, I know, the metal's getting hotter, the heat changes the way it welds. Again, initial impressions. So that's real hot. You can see it's widening out a little bit. It's not perfect, but I mean, you know, these welds just look a little bit cleaner. I think that's actually, you know, a really nice speed overall. Probably a little too fast, but is it still penetrating? yeah, it's definitely still penetrating. That one might look, it looks about the same as the other two, but you can see that's working. And no, I'm not welding two pieces of metal together right now. I just want to see how it lays down a bead. So I'm going to turn the wire speed down a little bit and the voltage down a little bit to a little lower than it was the first time. So there's definitely too much buildup there. That's a really tall weld. But, I mean, and the penetration doesn't look quite as good, I would say. It's definitely still getting there. So what I would do in this case is I'm going to turn the wire feed speed down even a little bit more. So I've got it, you know, I mean, I've been only working with the 1 to 3 and the A to C range basically here. So right now I've got it on 2 for the wire feed speed, which is probably whatever, you know, 60 inches per minute, and the A.5, if you will, which is probably only about 30 amps. So I'm just going to try to lay down one more bead. Oh no, it's not clean, don't care. Alright, that's clearly too slow on the speed, so I'm actually going to turn it up to the 3.5 mark, just see what happens. So again, we're getting a tall bead here. Penetration's still okay, but I really think the power, I'm going to go to about B.5 with this 3.5 wire feed speed, which is similar to where I had it the first time, a little faster wire. I'm just going to clean up a spot here real quick. And I mean, that just, you know, that puts in some metal, that penetration right there in the middle. So yeah, I don't know. To me, it's just the Harbor Freight has a very different feel. No matter what, it's never quite as smooth as this one seems to be. And I'll show you again just one more time for comparison. It just, the Eastwood does seem smoother, lays down as good of a bead or better, faster, and with the same penetration. So on thin sheet metal, of course, it's a different story, because that's when I have the Eastwood turned all the way down, and I'm not worried so much about the penetration as I am just getting it attached and not having it blow holes. And the Harbor Freight is not good at that, because the minimum power with this thing also has the minimum wire feed speed, and just put on globs. The Eastwood, I just tried it out on a piece of rusty metal and it worked pretty well. So here's just one more bead with the Harbor Freight. I'll set it to about, I'm just going to set it to 3. Who knows exactly what speed that is, but similar to where the Eastwood was set. And, you know, so kind of a thin weld, a little bit taller than it should be. You know, that's down to the settings and the welding technique. But overall, not bad. Just more spatter, not tons more. And again, that could be down to the wire. But that bead actually, you can see the penetration here, penetrated a lot, maybe even almost over penetration. And you know, that's the issue with the Eastwood. I could turn down the power just a little bit, you know, or maybe I want that much penetration, maybe I want a little more, I could turn it up a little bit. With the Harbor Freight, if I turn it down, it's going to turn down that wire feed speed, and it just doesn't have as much control. So my overall initial impressions is both of these things can lay down a good bead, especially, you know, once you have it dialed in. That bead's really nice. All of these welds are a little bit tall. You know, they're not perfect, but if I was welding two pieces of metal together, these might be pretty nice welds. Again, I'm not an expert welder, initial impressions, but so far, I definitely like the Eastwood, and where it's really going to pay dividends, and I only paid about twice as much for this Eastwood as the Harbor Freight, is when I'm welding on thin sheet metal, and that's especially going to be true when I get a gas tank hookup to it. because that's when the welding's really going to improve. Flux core is much better for doing thick, heavy-handed jobs, not the finite stuff. But to get me by for now, I wanted the adjustability of the Eastwood to let me do the thin stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Like I said, initial impressions. Sorry if it ran a bit long, but I know I like watching stuff like this. And later on, I'll do my full review of the Eastwood. I probably won't do a full review of the Harbor Freight welder. There's a million of those out there. But this welder seems really good for the price, and I just wanted to try it out and have fun with it since I just got it, and I'm going to be busy with school. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, subscribe. It really helps me out, lets me know how many people are watching, and I'll keep making stuff. Thanks, guys.